Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited for today's interview and our conversation. If you are catching this on the replay, because we don't do the interviews live, but if you're catching this on the replay, go ahead and put a hashtag replay in the chat. Let us know what you found most fascinating or most interesting, or the things that this made you think about for your own work as well. My name is Miss Jai. I use she, her, and he, him pronouns. I'm the host of Ask Miss Jai Live, and I am very excited to be interviewing and talking to Vikó Velázquez today. So Vikó Velázquez is the child of Mexican immigrants, born in Mexico City and raised in Tucson. They are passionate about community health, social advocacy, and social justice, music, and language. As an AmeriCorps Public Ally, they worked at 1 in 10, a Phoenix-based LGBTQ youth resource organization. They earned a master's degree in social justice and human rights advocacy from ASU. As part of their degree, Vikó created VEME, Queering Phoenix, a photo story project that explored QTBIPOC identity and the importance of public spaces in queer identity and community building. Vikó has always focused their work on youth and young adults, believing that we can help influence and create a better future by giving young people time, tools, attention, and hope. Vikó is committed to helping Tucson grow into a better place where we can all live dignified and joyful lives. Thank you so much for joining me today, Vikó. I'm really grateful that we get a chance to sit down and chat today.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here.
So how's your week been going? Would you like to share a thorn or any challenges and a rose? Anything positive?
My week has been going pretty well overall, I want to say. Maybe my thorn was not sleeping super well on Tuesday. So Tuesday I just had like a super groggy mind for most of the day, but got through it and took a nap and actually had a good like second half of my day. I would say my thorn has been just how many different things I've gotten to do this week. On Tuesday, I played a show at Club Congress. On Wednesday, Miss Jai and I co-hosted a presentation for folks at the Arizona Department of Health Services. And then today, I get to do some Kindred Connection stuff. And so, yeah, just a super full week.
Well, thank you for being here and for making time for us to talk. One of my roses for the week was also us being able to co-facilitate a training together because it was really phenomenal. And thank you for being vulnerable in talking about this stuff. I know that with having worked with youth, the thorn and rose is kind of commonplace language for us.
For sure, yeah.
So you've shared that you're passionate about public health and community organizing and are part of the Kindred Connections Collective. What inspired you to start doing this work?
I really think it came from my years working in nonprofit organizations primarily. There are so many wonderful lessons and tools that I acquired in those spaces and really wanted to find out how I could get those tools back into my community and uh, commit myself to work into projects that I felt really passionate about. And so that's really how I made the jump from one space to another. So much of working in nonprofits and working in community building is being a part of your community. And so it just seemed like a seamless, shift.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit about what some of those passion projects are?
Yeah, so right now with Kindred Connections, one of the big projects that we have is organizing a yearly Trans Day of Remembrance here in Tucson and having it be a combination between, a space where we can honor and really mourn for our trans siblings that were lost, while also making space for trans joy, celebrating our lives, and uplifting the trans folks who are a part of the Tucson community and help make this place so lively. So that's a big project. Another project is working with the garden group that Kindred Connections has started. We meet about twice a month and just talk plants and build community connections. One of my favorite things is just like swapping seeds and planting tips with different queer BIPOC folks and just really talking about our connections with plants, the land, our families, our cultures, different ways that we've been taught to connect with our plant siblings. So that's been super inspiring and just a really positive space to connect with other folks and do something that feels really rewarding. And then another one of the projects that Kindred Connections does a lot of work around is community resource redistribution. So right now we're getting ready to do our second year of care packages for the summertime. We live in Tucson, we live in the super crazy desert, and oftentimes I feel like the summer is our hardest season. And so we've been working with herbalists and medicine makers here in Tucson to create different teas, salves, all kinds of different herbal products that can help our community get through the summer. So right now we're working with a local Yaqui family that makes natural soaps using wild harvested ingredients that they get here in the southern desert. Also working with another herbalist out of Wolfberry Apothecary named Avi, who's making a toxic-free bug repellent, and also working with my friend Yessi Oliveira, who's a part of Apapachame Tierra, who makes salves and makes different sort of like skin soothing solutions for the summer. So really excited to have another opportunity to distribute those and just, bring a little token of like love and care to the community while most of us are like kind of hiding away from the summer heat in our homes.
Yeah, for sure. Can you so first of all, those sound amazing, and I feel like a lot of the examples that you just gave are outside of traditional Western medicine, and the majority of the well, maybe traditional isn't correct because traditional Western medicine would be indigenous, but outside of like the medical environment or outside of
Mm-hmm.
clinical or even sometimes like public health environments.
Mm-hmm.
And so can you share a little bit more for our audience, which is predominantly healthcare providers and public health organizations, on how your public health background has contributed to sourcing and finding these all alternative ways in these indigenous medicine to provide to our communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that I learned in working in public health was like really getting an idea of what public health means, right? And it means accessibility for everyone. It means, to me, it means harm reduction in a lot of different ways. It means being able to have a positive relationship with your community and their health and well-being. And so one of the big things that I felt like were sometimes missing in public health settings and nonprofit settings was a little bit more of that cultural background and that cultural what is the word that I'm looking for? There's like a term.
Like
Basically,
responsiveness.
yes, exactly, like a cultural responsiveness in the different interventions and programs that I worked in. And so that really became like a fundamental and really inspiring piece that then drove what Kindred Connections Collective is becoming. It's kind of bridging those two pieces together and having ways of supporting communal and communities health while also integrating cultural perspectives, cultural backgrounds, and knowledge that we already hold, right? And so, yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of the different kind of like technologies and skills that we uplift and that we share out with our community are outside of kind of the Western medicine, um, what would you call it? Sort of like system, and really are meant to create that bridge and build connection and help us in a way also reconnect to ancestral knowledge and traditional knowledge that we already have and potentially have been has been kind of isolated from us or taken from us.
Yeah, I would imagine that the conversations that you have with community members who are engaging in services with you all are going to look different. They are going to look different than what the conversations that I might have had in a clinical setting with folks, or that we might have had in a public health setting with folks, especially around like interventions and things like that. And so I'm curious if you can describe some of the health needs that you've learned about through Kindred Connections or just through your community mobilization work that you've done.
You know, it absolutely is a big part of what I've been learning in a lot of the conversation that happens with our group. You know, and it does look very different from the traditional clinical setting. A lot of times it's more community-based conversations. We meet together and just kind of start to take a kind of a temperature check of how everyone is doing. And based off of what people are telling us, we then are able to kind of like support one another and see where everyone is at. And so some of the things that have really, some of the needs that have really become apparent through the work that we've done in Kindred Connections has been a lot of that community building. So trying to address isolation, right? And trying to do it in a way that is culturally competent, right? That's the word that I was looking for earlier. So as we mentioned, you know, Tucson is in the desert. In the summertime, people can be really isolated. If our trans and non-binary and queer siblings are also struggling with things like secure income and transportation, that can further isolate them and prevent them from being able to be a part of community spaces that could center or benefit for their health. And so what we try to do is create different ways that folks can access us. So like, for example, for the care packages, we do ask folks to come and pick them up because we like meeting folks and just, you know, being like, hey, this is something that we worked on for you. But if folks aren't able to get transportation or have other barriers around picking up their care package, we also deliver those care packages to them in their homes. And we've received a lot of feedback from folks that are like, you know, I was really happy to receive this. I was going through a really hard time. I, you know, was experiencing some personal issues, some personal stress, and to like open my door and see this care package was really beneficial and made me feel really cared for. Other things that we address a lot are kind of dynamics around food and food insecurity, right? I don't want to say just food insecurity because, you know, food is a big part of a lot of our different aspects of our life. And one of them for folks who are struggling financially is access to food. Another of them is access to knowledge about what is healthy food, right? And what does healthy food look like for folks of different cultures and different backgrounds? Once again, stepping out of the sort of European Western context of health and well-being. And so really talking about what are foods that we eat traditionally that maybe we've been taught to not value as much because they don't fit within European Western perspectives. What are foods that we've been disconnected from? What are ways that we can build stronger relationships with one another by building stronger relationships to land and place, right? And so then that also taps into sustainability and really figuring out how to be a community that is responsible and is aware of the impacts that we have on our environment as well. So I think all of those different pieces have been really crucial to guide Kindred Connections work and has really helped us organically kind of design events and programs based off of that.
Yeah, could you provide some examples of traditional foods that maybe fall outside of like what have been taught to us as nutrition standards, or what might be pushed as nutrition standards, so that folks listening can better conceptualize what that might entail and also maybe apply that to their own
Yeah,
practice?
absolutely. So definitely for a lot of folks who come from Central and South America and the Americas here, corn is a crop that has been, over time, the nutritional value of corn has been really negatively affected by things like genetic modification. And so the corn that we often see grown in like Middle America, the Midwest, that is typically grown for things like fructose corn syrup and also feeding cows is a corn that has really low nutritional value. And so in general, if you speak to nutritionists who don't have more of that cultural competency and more of that cultural perspective, they'll tell you that corn is a vegetable with very little nutritional value and very little nutritional gain, basically. This is in complete juxtaposition or opposition to what many of us from traditional indigenous and indigenous descendant folks have learned about corn, which is that, you know, for a lot of indigenous tribes in Mesoamerica, which is now Mexico for the most part, lots of origin stories come from folks literally being born from corn. So it's really one of those crops that is central to our food and central to our nutrition. And you know, globalization, things like Monsanto have really changed that. But if we're able to go back to some traditional food ways of seeing like, where is our corn coming from? Is it being grown, mass produced in huge Monsanto farms, or is it being grown locally by local farmers who have you know, connections to seeds and corn crops that have a higher nutritional value? So that's a good example of one. And corn actually grows really well here in the Southern Desert. There's a lot of varieties of corn that have evolved to be able to withstand really dry climates. And so, for example, right now in my garden, I have some blue corn growing that one of my friends gave me from, and I believe they got the seeds from a friend that is up in the Navajo Nation. So it's corn that's been growing in these desert lands for, you know, lots of years now, and is adapted to these climates and still has a high nutritional value. Another example that I can think of is thinking of soul food, right? Soul food, I think, can sometimes get a really bad rap for being unhealthy or being too greasy, too heavy. But the reality is that soul food comes from a long history of food and culture that is really important and beneficial to people's health as well. And lots of the ingredients that are used in soul foods, like collard greens and black eyed peas, and once again, corn, are crops that have high nutritional value and that our ancestors have used for many, many years to, you know, continue staying healthy and continue growing. And so really finding ways to reconnect with those foods, changing those narratives, and incorporating foods that have both nutritional value as well as cultural and like sentimental value.
Yeah, thank you so much for those examples. I think that really helps to illustrate what you were sharing around the necessity for us to look at how culturally we experience our world and experience our health. Because I think something like as commonplace as nutrition, which I feel like most providers will talk about nutrition with us at some point in our lives, really helps us to understand what it means to be connected to ancestry, connected to our traditions, and how sometimes the advice that we get from a medical provider can be in opposition or in juxtaposition to what we know or what we've been taught growing up.
Absolutely, you know, and at the end of the day, really, the work that we're all doing within public health is trying to better the health outcomes for our communities. And if we're able to identify ways that are, you know, scientifically, nutritionally sound, but also culturally connected and are connected into different parts of our participants' lives, the likelihood that they'll be able to upkeep those habits and be successful, you know, increases greatly.
So that actually leads me into my next question, which is, what are some of the ways that organizations or health providers could address some of these health needs while also maintaining that cultural aspect? What are some ways that we could shift, some things that individuals or organizations could do?
You know, yeah, this makes me think a lot about the curriculum that we've actually been doing with the health department, where a lot of the work that we are talking with folks about comes back to, how do you initiate that conversation with your participants, right? Like, how do we create spaces within our work, within our service settings, to have conversations with our clients, with our patients, to see where they're at and how we can kind of fill in and support their health and their well-being. So a lot of the times I think about, if you're in a setting where you're talking to folks about access to nutrition, right, or access to food, like, are you asking what kind of food they're accessing? Are you asking if they feel healthy, right? If they feel strong, if they feel lethargic, if they feel energized? Are you asking them, like, what are some of their favorite foods to eat, right? And what are ways that we can incorporate and ensure that we're keeping foods that have that emotional, cultural connection in a wellness or well-being plan? Other things that I think about are inviting outside organizations that focus on traditional foodways to teach a cooking workshop, to maybe drop off some flyers, to connect participants or clients to have access to seeds so that they can learn to grow if that's something that they're interested in. Oftentimes I think about the young folks that I used to work with in South Tucson who were in high school, and like lots of them didn't quite yet have like a desire to learn to grow food, and they still weren't quite there and like understanding how it all fits together. But one thing that they would often say is that they have a tia or a tío or a grandparent who has a beautiful garden, right? And oh yeah, my grandma has been growing mint forever and she always makes me tea with that mint. Or oh yeah, like my tío has, fruit trees, and every season when they give fruit, like we get fruit from my tío, right? So all these different things, and just being able to say like, yeah, that's like a perfect example of what we're talking about, right? Like this lemon or this fruit isn't just a lemon or a fruit. It also represents your connection to your family, represents your family's connection to their land, and all of these other intricate systems of support. So definitely thinking about ways to bring in those conversations to different organizations and inviting different providers to maybe fill in those gaps.
And do you feel like there are nuances for our trans, non-binary folks within our communities as well? And how do those nuances also shift the ways that providers can support trans and non-binary people who are at these intersections of identities?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I feel like I've personally experienced as a trans person growing up in the United States is really seeing how there was oftentimes a big divide between community support and what was seen as like familial support, right? And one of the things that I think we talk about a lot within queer organizations and trans organizations is the idea of chosen family, right? And so we know that there are a lot of different challenges that we often face around biological family, but that doesn't prevent us from being able to make our own networks of chosen family, and then being able to diffuse different knowledge that we all bring within one another. So it makes me think of some of the conversations we've had with folks who are part of the garden group who, aren't blood related, but are related in the fact that they've been a part of the Tucson community for many years, and now have a history of having seen one another at different events, having volunteered at different events together, and how we can really use those interconnections that happen organically or also happen in different kind of like created settings to support the well-being and the health of our community. I also think sometimes it can be difficult to have conversations around like, heritage and ancestry if folks are experiencing disconnect or loss around their family. But it can also, the flip side of that could be like learning how to sort of reclaim also that knowledge that maybe like you don't have that connection to your aunts and your uncles or your extended family, but the knowledge that they shared with you is still there, and that is still something that is yours, right? And could be applied to your living life without necessarily overstepping boundaries that are going to like put you in a situation that feels unsafe or hostile.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. I think that really is poignant for me to think about the fact that like even if that family is no longer around, the lessons that we learn from that family is still present, and how powerful that can be in communities where generational knowledge is passed on as well.
Yeah, and I think, I think the first time that I kind of like started to understand and learn that lesson was in just being so far away from my family. As an immigrant, my family is, a plane ride away, not super close. And especially when I was younger and when we didn't have a lot of, funds for travel and stuff, there were different ways that we stayed connected to our family. And parts of those were really embedded in food and in different recipes that were passed down from my grandparents to my parents to now me. And as I've grown older, there's a lot of extended family that I no longer really have strong connections to, but the knowledge that I was able to receive as a kid and the experiences that I was able to have are now something that I can like translate and have like a much more positive outlook on. So instead of feeling like sad or weird, which still happens about like not having that much extended family support, I'm able to like go out to my garden and be like, oh look, I'm growing a dragon fruit, which is like the same plant that my family plants and grows in Oaxaca. And so like thinking about the way that our plant siblings also are a part of our families and continue our connections.
That's so wonderful. I wonder too for you, if you were dreaming big, if we had unlimited resources, what would you create or co-create to help or support BIPOC trans people in thriving?
One of the things that I often think about is having a space where you can have intergenerational interactions where you can kind of build that support of not necessarily like divulging, but passing down knowledge and passing down experience. I think that is sometimes something that I really long for within our queer communities. There's a lot of history that prevents us from having queer elders, such as losing so many of our elders to the AIDS crisis back in the 80s and the 90s. Also, just isolation that our elders experience that make them like not super open and willing to maybe still be a part of community spaces, but really thinking about like how can we change that for the youth now, right? And so how can we create positive spaces where young folks are able to see older queer folks thriving, that are connected to their community, that they can go to with a question and potentially avoid them some of the strifes that maybe we went through by being like, no girl, like how about you do it this way, or maybe look at it from this perspective, right? And so really thinking about what it would look like to have a space like that where you have multiple generations present and then the exchange of food. So community meals that are maybe curated menus that include different recipes from different parts of the world that different folks have decided to make and share with others. I think that would be wonderful, right? And having like these communal spaces where you can have like a super delicious dinner, meet other queer BIPOC folks, and listen to music, look at art, and just have this kind of holistic wellness approach to community and communion.
That's great. So if anyone out there listening is wanting to build multi-generational programming and that centers around food and cultural foods, Vikó is the person to reach out to. So before I move into my last question for our conversation today, how can folks connect with you? What are some of the ways that they can find you and continue these conversations? Or if they are interested in building multi-generational programming, reach out to you to start some of that.
So Kindred Connections has an Instagram and a Facebook. You can just look us up under Kindred Connections Collective. And then you can also contact me via Instagram. My personal Instagram is Flor de Nopal Music. That's my music project, which means like prickly pear flower. And so once again, like it's just like this very clear obsession that I've had for many years about our connection to like plants and land and culture and all these things. So definitely Instagram is a good place to reach me. And I will also be sure to give Miss Jai my email so that we can put it in the comments and people can also hit me up via email.
Yeah, for sure. In the description, we'll have the links to the Instagram and Facebook for Kindred Connections, but also your Instagram and your email address, because I'd love for folks to connect with you to talk about queer plants and talk about our connections to food and our roots, and how to build these programs out, because I think it sounds like the time is now.
Yeah, time is always now.
Exactly. So I thank you for meeting with me today. Thank you for taking time, especially during a busy week, to sit down and talk through some of the things that you're passionate about. And as trans and non-binary people, we're often asked to share our struggles and our pains, especially as a learning tool for folks. But there's so much more to us than just what we experience and how we're treated in society. And so to wrap up today, I'm curious, what are some things that bring you joy? What are some things that fill your cup?
Oh, awesome. Pets for sure. I have two cats and a dog, and they bring me so much joy and so much laughter. Music is a big one, even though sometimes having that be a part of my career can be stressful. At the end of the day, I'm like, I need to listen to some music. I want to play some music. So I think those are huge for me. And also just being out in nature. I am really happy now that I think about like how much time I get to spend out in nature, and whether that be hiking or camping or just visiting different areas. And so those are the biggest things: nature, music, and animals.
Those are great ones, the big three.
Yeah.
What are
The
your,
trifecta.
yeah, exactly. What are your pets' names?
I have a little Chihuahua pug named Kiwi, and then an orange cat named Merle, or El Güero, because none of the Spanish speakers in my family can say Merle, so they just call him El Güero. And then Fati Luna, who's another little beautiful cat.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your joys. Thank you for being here today and having this conversation. To everyone who is listening in, thank you for listening. Please share in the comments below what this has you thinking about, some of the things that this might have brought up for you, or any piece of this that you found the most interesting, or questions that come from this as well. And please connect with Vikó and with Kindred Connections through Instagram, Facebook, and email. And until next time, thank you for all of us. Thank you for taking the time and energy to invest in the health and well-being of trans and non-binary people.
My
Until next time,
pleasure. Thank you.
thank you. Have a great one and much love.